you are at the info session for the broadband availability map submission. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce the rest of the DHCD team. Tamara Holmes is our director. Chandler Vaughn is our policy analyst. And Brandon, do you want to introduce your team?
Sure. Hi, my name is Brandon Herndon. I'm the director for the Center for Geospatial Information Technology at Virginia Tech. We are the subcontracted under DHCD to develop the submission portal and the broadband map for the state. Here with me from my team today is Joe Newman and Mario Garza.
And Brandon will actually be the one presenting today. Do you have the presentation to put up, or do you want me to put it up?
Okay, everybody see my screen okay? All right, great. All right, I'll jump right in. As I said, my name is Brandon Herndon. I'm director for CGIT at Virginia Tech. A little bit of introduction to the collection process and what we based it on. So historically, broadband coverage data is based on the FCC 477 submission process, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. The FCC is going through changing that process, and based on the FCC third order that was released on about a year ago on January 19th, 2021, they're going to move to be collected at the address level. This has not been implemented federally yet. However, Virginia wanted to start collecting this data to increase the resolution and accuracy of broadband coverage within the state of Virginia. So the current Virginia submission process was approved and adopted by the Virginia budget bill back in April of 21. I did want to note that it is the provider's responsibility to ensure that your own data is correct. If you look through the FCC third order, there is a challenge process, although the challenge process for the state of Virginia is still to be determined. If you submit incorrect coverage, this could drive additional future work for citizens challenging coverage that providers submit and having to answer to a public challenge process. Data has to be submitted via the submission portal only. Sometimes we do work with providers to get their data accurate via email offline, but we cannot accept official submissions via email. It has to go through the submission portal. Data collection timeline to date. So we were contracted starting on July 1st of last year to develop the submission portal, collect the data for the state from all the providers, and then roll out a new map this year with that collected data. The public comment period on the submission guidelines that we drafted were available starting October 1st. On November 15th, the portal opened for initial submissions all the way through December 22nd. We reopened the portal for the week of January 3rd to capture some additional submissions and corrections. And then on January 14th, we released a data preview map from the data we collected. We did not receive as many initial submissions as hoped. You'll see in subsequent slides, I think it was around 40% of providers submitted. So that's why we're having these Q&A sessions now to help you guys answer some of your questions. So the portal is being reopened starting on Monday for next week only for additional initial submissions to get your data into the new map we're going to release for the state. After that, if there's any corrections to those submissions, that will be in the week after. So initial submissions will only be accepted next week, but if there's any corrections that are needed, we'll work with you and be able to accept those revised submissions until the 25th. We currently have an April 1st target release date for the new broadband mapping tool. That's why we're trying to get this data as soon as we can so we can make sure it's captured correctly when we release the new mapping tool to the public. Some current collection results and challenges from our initial collection back in the fall in November and December. We had a 37% submission rate, and that's based on providers, not total addresses. Many of the large providers did submit. And we believe the coverage might be slightly overstated. 25.3 service was reported for a little over 3 million addresses, which is 82% of the addresses covered within the state. Some providers submitted polygons, which are just shape files of the submission, of their coverage data. And so we had to make the assumption that the shape file contained, all the addresses contained in the shape file submitted to us were covered. And, we know on some spot checks that this may not be true. Um, so as I said, the submission portal was opened first on November 15th. However, we did not receive our first submission until December 7th. And also many first submissions from providers were just repeated 477 data. So the providers didn't look at the submission instructions or and what to give us, which resulted in incorrect submissions and a lot of additional work on both parties' sides to get the data into a format that we needed to correctly map at the address point level. That being said, the address that you're giving to us will not be released publicly. We're aggregating all the data at the census block level, and the current map looks like this. So I can turn on a layer. Here's what current FCC 477 coverage looks like. It'll be highlighted in pink after it loads. And then I'll also turn on any address in the block that's covered as well. Maybe. Okay. I'll come back to that in a second. Oh. So I did want to highlight some technical guidelines. There's two ways to submit data to us. One is via a CSV, comma delimited text file. We selected initially the VDRN address point ID as a unique identifier for all address points located in the Commonwealth instead of using the address itself, because this is state maintained and updated quarterly, and it's actually just a unique number string. So it's much easier to communicate to us in a correct manner. A lot of providers that send us just the addresses sometimes will misspell words and or represent addresses in different formats that sometimes are hard to resolve. So that's why we selected the VGen address point ID as a simple string of numbers that's very easily identifiable to what address it relates to. If you do decide to use the VGen address point ID and you decide to edit your data using Microsoft Excel, please make sure that you format the column as text to prevent auto scientific notation from Excel. For example, we'll have a string of files that will be converted to this number here, and this destroys the underlying data, and that's not usable. So we've had that issue with some providers that submitted CSVs to us. Some providers do have trouble utilizing the VGen address point IDs, although that's the most straightforward way to communicate the addresses to us. So a full address may be used in lieu of this, and we've updated our technical guidelines here, and we'll send these slides out after the presentation so you have all these links and can access them at your leisure. So if full addresses are used, you'll still leave the address point ID column within your document, but they'll just all be zeros. And instead, you'll have two additional columns at the end for full address and zip5. There's directions in the technical guidelines on how to format your CSV for different columns. And keep in mind that if incorrect column headers are in the CSV you're submitting to us, our file checker will automatically reject the CSV you submit. So you have to make sure those column headers are correct when submitting the files to us via the submission portal. Another way you can submit data to us is for a GIS shapefile. They should be points. However, you can also use polygons with attribute data associated to an entire polygon. And they should have unique identifiers and be non-overlapping. If a polygon submitted instead of points, it's assumed that all addresses contained within the polygon will have services available as indicated by the attribute data. And here's some within the shapefile. Here are the files that are included for that submission if you decide to submit in that way. The data submission process, currently our page is not active. It will be active on Monday for submissions, but you'll go to the submit data button. Also here you can reference the submission guidelines and the process. Also support link to contact us and DHCD if you have any questions for us to assist you with. So here's what the provider information looks like when you start the submission process. The ones that are starred are required. If you submit initially and it's rejected and you have to resubmit, please make sure your company name is the same. We've had providers submit a couple times and they'll spell their company or call their company several different things on different submissions. So please try to keep that standardized if you can. I mean, we will have your contact information, but it just helps keep data cleaner in our database. We're getting many submissions from different sources. Once you fill in the contact information, you'll have a file manager here where you can add files that you want to submit. And after you add files that you want to submit, you just click the submit data on the bottom and it'll send it to us. Here's an example of a file type not supported, so you can remove that file because we only support several file types, those being CSVs or different types of shape files. And as I said before, in the CSVs, we do check the column headers as well, so make sure those are correct. After you submit, you'll get a confirmation that your submission has been received. And if there's any issues with your data, we'll be in touch. If you don't hear back from us, you can just assume everything's good, but we'll be in touch with you if we need any additional information from you. So I wanted to, here's a example of the current map that's there. So we have in pink here is FCC Form 477 data. And this is just based on the data that we received back in from November 15th through early January that we collected on the initial collection. In the light blue areas here, this is area that's covered by the data that we received, but not by FC 477. And in the pink area, that would be 477 data that's not covered by the data we received. So you can see there's some discrepancies in both data sets, which we were expecting. One reason is because FCC Form 477 data is usually lagged by 12 to 18 months old. For example, the most recent 477 data that is available online right now for publishing is based on December 2020 data, which is a little over a year old. And that's another reason why Virginia wanted to move forward with their own address collection, so we don't have that 12 to 18 month lag in data from when you submit to the FCC from when they publish it for us to use. And not only that, but we can have our information at a higher resolution. So we're aggregating by address point at the census block level. And if you go to our map, you'll be able, this is just a backup slide because the map's hanging up in my backend right now. I'll look at that after we get off the call here, but you can select different types of percentage of service. So for example, if you click the 85% served, it will highlight 85% of addresses or more are covered within a census block, it will show that census block is covered. So there's different ways to slice this information. And the state has still to make a determination at what percentage we will consider fully served. One example in the US right now is Georgia is doing something similar. And I believe their cutoff is 80%. Lonnie could correct me on that possibly, but I think it's around 80% for Georgia. So I think Virginia is moving towards a higher cutoff percentage to consider a census block served or not. So my guess is it'll be either 85, 90, or 95% for Virginia to consider a census block served or not. And here's an example of the 95%. Where the 95% is the very dark area. So you can see the discrepancy of, if you just currently FCC 477, if any address is covered, then it will show up as covered. And then our information for any address covered is the kind of lighter blue here. And then if you pare that down to 95% of addresses covered, you kind of get the darker area. And that's from the current information we have now. So that's my presentation. I will stop presenting. I did want to save a lot of time for the current providers on to ask questions for us if needed. And as I said before, we'll publish these slides so you can review them. And if you have any questions with the submission process as you're going through it, you can always feel free to reach out to us or DHCD. We'd be glad to help you.
I'll go ahead and put the contact email for CGIT and DHCD in the chat box, and those emails are also in the email that had this meeting information if you need to find them again later.